dans une vingtaine de minutes et relu. Après quoi, je donnerai tour à tour la parole aux membres du jury qui feront leurs observations, leurs remarques et observations sur votre sujet et éventuellement vous poseront des questions dont vous prendrez note au fur et à mesure des interventions pour répondre globalement après. Après quoi, j'interviendrai pour clôturer la série des interventions, des questions et remarques. Je vous rendrai la parole donc pour répondre à ces questions avant que le jury ne se retire pour délibérer. Monsieur Moussa Antoumani, je vous donne la parole.
Thank you, Chairman, for giving me the floor. The topic on the study is Africana integration, past, present, and future. But before entering into the heart of my presentation, I would like first to thank all of you for the interest you have shown in this work by accepting to participate in the jury. Allow me also, dear committee, to say a few words to express my gratitude particularly to my research director, Professor Gorgi Jen, for his generosity and assistance. Dear members of the jury, it may be just an anecdote, but I remember when I wrote my Master 2 dissertation, I want to see Professor Jen and talk to him about my situation here in Senegal. I had just lost my father, and my uncle, who is supporting me financially here, had just abandoned me. I told Professor Jen that I have to defend immediately and go back to Comoros, or if I could have the chance to apply for PhD, I would have a financial support from an NGO. I was thinking about Codestria, which supports financially PhD students every year, but I have never got any financial support from any NGO anyway. The same week, Professor Jen planned my defense and started the process of my registration at the Doctorat school. I tell you this story, dear members of the jury, because Professor Jen showed me the most beautiful thing I have ever been shown. After my defense, Professor Jen himself brought the report of my Master 2 defense to submit it to the administration. He dealt with the paperwork. What I had to do was to go and get my student card. I remember calling my mother that same week because she was waiting for my return to Comoros, and I told her everything. She said, "Son, you've lost your biological father, but I think you have got another one in Senegal." Dear Professor, this is my way of expressing my gratitude and that of my whole family. There are no other words I can use to thank you, sir, so accept these few and simple words. Thank you very much. The work that I have the honor and the pleasure of presenting before you today is entitled African Integration, Past, Present, and Future. My presentation is structured around 5 parts. The first will focus on the reasons that led me to work on African civilization, particularly on African integration and Pan-Africanism in general. The second part deals with the results and global conclusions of my researches. The third part of this presentation talks about the impact this work may have in this field of study. The fourth is about the methodology used to achieve this work. As far as the last one is concerned, it is a question of the difficulties encountered. Dear members of the jury, when I was in License 1, I had a 0 in African civilization. The exam focused on the Mali Empire. For sure, this chapter was on the program, but the professor in charge to teach us this, we never saw him. The day of the exam, my classmates managed with the knowledge they had in this field to write something on their exam papers, because it seems that since primary school here in Senegal, students learn the history of ancient Africa. As far as I'm concerned, I come from a country which is lost between 3 paths. Indeed, we Comorians are certainly Africans by nature, but many of us believe that they are more Arabs than Africans. And to this is added the French influence in the country. Now, dear members of the jury, that nearly half of the Comorian population lives in Europe, precisely in France. You probably now understand why Comorians tend to ignore everything about Africa. In lesson 3, in our department, in the second semester precisely, students must choose between 3 civilizations: American, Britain, and African civilization and literature. I can assure you that it was not an easy choice for me. I was torn between civilizing in American and British civilization, but after reflection, I said to myself, before knowing the others, I have to know myself. So I decided to go into this field of African civilization, and in doing so, I discovered the beauty and richness that lie behind African history. I then came to the conclusion that if African history remains unknown, especially to its own sons, it is largely because they are divided and scattered everywhere. But the question still remains, why did I choose African integration? Since the independence of the majority of African countries until today, African heads of state and government have constantly expressed their interest in the social, economic, and political unification of their countries. People still ask, however, today, what is the outcome of more than half a century of integration policy advocated by Pan-African organizations? What is the future of African integration? But the most important question is, why should Africans be united? Aware that African integration presents itself as the best alternative to protect African peoples against famine, wars, neo-colonialism, and bad governance, and so on, recognizing that without the unity of African countries, the continent will always remain under the influence of great imperialists, many Africans in the diaspora and on the continent of Africa continue to struggle to materialize the dream of the ancient Pan-Africanists. From Marcus Garvey to Kwame Nkrumah, and from Kwame Nkrumah to Muammar Gaddafi, Pan-Africanism has crossed the boundaries of space and time. Given the clashes that existed between African countries before and just after the independence, many Pan-African pioneers dared to hope that the 1963 Addis Ababa meeting could bring lasting solutions to the misunderstanding that prevailed on the continent. But at the end of the meeting, the most popular solution that was adopted by the majority of African heads of state is the creation of a simple organization to be known as the Organization of African Unity, the OAU. The final conclusion of that meeting turned out to be a real shock for Pan-Africans like Kwame Nkrumah, who counted a lot on that meeting to bring real solutions to real challenges such as colonialism, Western imperialism, and above all, to unify Africa so that it could be respected like the great nations. For many years, the Organization of African Unity was only an association of African heads of state who met every year to discuss their daily problems without finding real solutions. And that situation lasted until 1999, when a son of Africa, but this time from the north, namely Muammar Gaddafi, decided to give hope to this Pan-African dream. The OAU had indeed lived for 39 years and is only remembered today for the role it played in liberating the African countries from the hands of the colonizers. Muammar Gaddafi will therefore succeed in exploiting the weaknesses of the OAU to impose himself as a messiah who has come to govern a dying continent. He will have the blessing of all, or almost all African leaders to validate his African Union project. Years later, it would not be too much of an exaggeration to say that the African Union project rested on the shoulders of one single man. Indeed, all African heads of state who followed Gaddafi were not, and still are not, convinced on the need to federate African countries. They simply followed him perhaps out of respect or fear of the man. This is the conclusion that one can provide because after the death of Kwame Nkrumah, all the projects initiated to facilitate the federation of African countries have come to a standby. Indeed, it was planned that from July 7th, 2006 to January 1st, 2007, African countries should abolish the custom duties between themselves. It was also planned from July 7th, 2007 to January 1st, 2008, African countries should establish a single African army. It was also planned that from January 1st, 2008 to the 7th of July 2008, ratification, revision, and preparation of the documents which should establish the United States of Africa. It was also planned from January 1st, 2006 to the 1st of January 2009, serious studies and work by the African Central Bank for the establishment of an African single currency should be launched. Unfortunately, all these commitments and many others were abandoned even before the death of El-Khadhafi. Initiative after initiative, agenda after agenda, it seems that African leaders have agreed never to agree on any project aimed at unifying the continent of Africa. This, however, largely explains the reason why many Pan-African projects initiated on the one hand by the Organization of African Unity and on the other by the African Union have literally failed. This is also explained why young Africans today want to take their destiny into their own hands to make a difference. This same youth, long ignored and disinterested in Pan-African issues, sees itself today as the only hope for a united and unified, and above all, free and liberated continent. This is why, as a young African, I could not see myself working on any other topic than African integration to contribute in any way to the awareness of Africa. From the introduction of our dissertation, the reader is projected into three different universes. First, this work briefly traces the history of African unity. It starts with the type of integration that existed between ancient Africans. In a word, we try to contextualize and show the origins of unity between African peoples. In the second part of our work, we make a general assessment of the Pan-African organizations that have been responsible for giving life to this dream of unity. As for the last part, this dissertation invites us to read about the future of the Pan-African organization through two angles. The first is Agenda 2063, and the second is the determination of African youth who seems to be determined to change things. In fact, our work led us to three conclusions which constitute the result obtained throughout its achievement. The first of the results shows that Africans are the victims of critical ignorance of their own history. That same history which should inspire them to better build their future. In tracing the history of African unity, we came to the conclusion that ancient Africans were united, at least more united than Africans are today. It is indeed demonstrated in the first part of our work that before the arrival of the slave masters in Africa, Africans were united within empires and kingdoms. And that unity of ancient Africans has resulted in the sharing of the same social and cultural values in today's Africa, such as polygyny, circumcision, the extended family versus nuclear family in the Western world. It is indeed by drawing inspiration from their history that Africans will be able to know that they share a lot of things, and their unity is more than the fact that they come from the same continent. In making the general assessment of the Pan-African organization, we have come to the conclusion that the OAU has not fully achieved many of its objectives, and its little sister, the African Union, has taken the wrong path for the one and only reason, which is none other than the lack of will from the African leaders. There are many other reasons that can explain why Pan-African organizations fail to achieve their number one objective. First, let us remind that when we talk about number one objective of any Pan-African organization, we mean the promotion of unity among the peoples of Africa and their countries. Reason number one, we can cite the fact that until now, most, if not all, African heads of state and government have not yet found the answer to why should Africans be united. Many of them indeed have always taken this question of unity at face value, unlike the new generation who see this cause of African unity as a matter of life and death. Today, many will tell you, and this is among the conclusions we have made in our dissertation, that without unity, African values are doomed to abandonment, even to disappearance. It is simply because these African values are unifying values, and if African countries do not exploit them to achieve unity, each country of Africa will once again be dominated not only economically and politically, but also culturally by the old and/or new world powers. And it is Africa that will eventually die. That is also the conclusion of Professor Job when dealing with one of the African unifying values. He says, linguistic unity on the basis of a foreign language from any angle is a cultural abortion. it will irremediably consecrate the death of the authentic national culture, the end of our deep spiritual and intellectual life, to reduce us to the role of eternal imitators, having missed their historical mission in this world. Professor Job says further that that is the reason why we must be radically hostile to all attempts at cultural assimilation from outside. The second reason can be the threats hanging over African leaders. Indeed, many Africans have already drawn the conclusion that anyone who dares to attack Western interests by trying to liberate the African people will be killed. And that belief hinders the achievement of African integration. As for the third result of our dissertation, we understand that by failing on its important and number one mission, the Pan-African body is never on the right track to guarantee true and solid African integration. And that Agenda 2063 is nothing other than a project, like so many others, that have never been taken seriously. As well mentioned in our introduction, this question of African unity is one of the topics that cause a lot of ink to flow. That means that many authors have written on this topic. It is therefore essential to know or be aware of what we can bring to it. However, although many have written about African unity and Pan-Africanism in general, few have succeeded in making the connection between the past, the present, and the future of Pan-Africanism. And therein lies the new elements that we intend to bring to this field. Our work, if ever accepted, is intended therefore to be a roadmap that will help new and future generations in this project of African unity so that they do not make the same mistakes. To be able to write this dissertation, I had to go into the field and play the role of hardened Pan-Africanist. You have certainly noticed that a considerable part of my dissertation is based on my personal Pan-African experience. My commitment to Pan-Africanism has allowed me to participate and organize many panels on the topic. I met many African authorities who, at some point in their lives, played a major role in this project of African integration. They helped me enormously to understand what I was getting to. To address a topic of such importance, I have adopted an analytical approach. It is the same approach that makes it possible to understand what was wrong with the Pan-African organization. This analytical approach helps us to understand why Pan-African initiatives have led to nothing for most of them. In this same perspective, the methodology that I have chosen to adopt leads us to live the future of the Pan-African organization by making an analysis that is as much predicative as prescriptive. Chairperson, dear members of the jury, like any work of this magnitude, this one was not carried out without serious obstacles. As we know, writing a doctoral dissertation is one of the laborious projects that a student can undertake. The difficulties that can be encountered during this adventure are enormous, and we certainly cannot list them all, but the most important are as following. The first obstacle we face when writing this dissertation is the lack of documentation. Actually, writing a dissertation in English when living in a Francophone country is a very big challenge because we most of the time have only access to books written in French. This challenge, you see it through our essay because when we translate from French to English, we sometimes lose the original meaning of the text, of course. Another challenge related to the lack of documentation is that we have to use internet sources to write our dissertation. The second obstacle I want to share with you here, dear professors, is my involvement in the Pan-African movements. As stated above, I participated since 2013 in many national and international Pan-African movements that has certainly contributed a lot in my understanding of the topic we deal with it. But it has also a considerable impact when writing this dissertation. You have certainly noticed when reading my dissertation that it was not easy for me to be neutral. I confess that when writing this dissertation, I rather adopt a militant tone. Among the difficulties that I can cite here is the lack of means to deepen my research. It is no secret that we students at UCAD, for the majority, finance our studies. Sometimes I didn't have even the transport cost to come to the library. I would have liked if the means allowed me to go to the heart of Pan-Africanism, namely Addis Ababa, to the headquarters of the African Union to have the information in real time. Having reached the end of my presentation, I will not fail to say what is said very often in such circumstances. Human work is never perfect, and I do not claim to be an exception to this model. If I am here today in front of you, it is to be evaluated, corrected, and oriented. Now, dear Professor, that your suggestions, your criticism, and your contributions will be welcome to me. Dear Professor, I would like to thank you once again for the honor that has been conferred on me by accepting to take part of this jury. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those who have directly or indirectly contributed to the achievement of this work. I thank my mother and my late father for their love and support. I thank my brothers and sisters for privileging my studies into the detriment of theirs. Thanks go to my beloved wife for her love, patience, and support, to my Senegalese families for making me feel at home in Senegal. Chairperson, members of the jury, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Musa. I think, Antoumani. Now I'm giving the floor to Professor Gorgudier, your supervisor. Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Faye, for giving me the floor. But before assessing the work, before dealing with the work itself, which is written in English, I've got to say some words in French, and you could have also said some words in French. Monsieur le Président du jury, professeur Faye, c'est un honneur vraiment de vous avoir toujours à nos côtés, nous aider à faire soutenir nos étudiants, et ça vous le faites depuis des années. Donc c'est l'occasion pour moi de vous remercier pour tous ces sacrifices qui nous auront permis de faire marcher, de faire fonctionner notre formation doctorale et en particulier notre laboratoire d'études africaines et postcoloniales. Vous avez toujours été présent, donc professeur, merci pour tout, non seulement en tant que collègue, mais aussi en tant que professeur, parce que vous avez été là quand nous étions étudiants. Donc, merci pour tout ce que vous avez fait pour nous. Merci aussi au professeur Kwame Nkrumah, de l'université Alassane Ouattara de Côte d'Ivoire, qui nous a fait l'honneur de venir participer à ce jury. C'est la première fois qu'il vient, mais je pense que ce n'est qu'un début et que la collaboration entre nos deux institutions, l'université Charles de Dakar et l'université Alassane Ouattara de Bouaké va continuer, en particulier entre nos deux spécialités, nos deux sections, les études africaines à Dakar et les études africaines à Bouaké. Merci beaucoup, professeur, de nous avoir aidés à faire soutenir ces étudiants, parce que nous avons eu quelques problèmes. Donc c'est grâce à votre collaboration que nous avons pu régler cette question et permettre à nos étudiants de soutenir. Professeur, merci. Je remercie aussi mon ami et collègue le professeur Abdongom, avec qui je chemine depuis des décennies et avec qui je collabore pour la bonne marche non seulement du laboratoire d'études africaines et postcoloniales, mais pour la bonne marche du département d'anglais. Parce que nous devons savoir qu'il y a une différence entre les départements et les laboratoires et les formations doctorales. Merci professeur Ngom pour ton amitié, pour la collaboration, pour ton engagement, sans lesquels il nous serait extrêmement difficile de faire face au flot de doctorants qui nous arrivent chaque année. Donc merci encore une fois pour la collaboration, merci pour l'amitié, merci pour les énormes sacrifices. J'arrive maintenant au candidat, Antoumani Moussa. Et je ne peux pas ne pas dire ça en français pour permettre à sa charmante épouse, sa dévouée épouse et à ses amis qui sont ici présents et qui ne sont pas présents dans ces salles, pour donc leur permettre de comprendre. La recherche est très difficile. J'ai l'habitude de dire ça à mes étudiants de master et de doctorat, que les diplômes qu'on délivre aux étudiants, nous ne les sortons pas de nos poches. Ça ne nous appartient pas. Ça appartient à l'institution, ça appartient au pays, ça appartient à l'académie même, d'une manière générale. Donc, nous acceptons de les conférer à des étudiants seulement après avoir constaté que le travail qu'ils nous ont présenté est digne du titre de master ou bien digne du titre de doctorat. C'est la raison pour laquelle il a souffert. Il a vraiment souffert. Ça lui a pris quelques années. Mais c'est essentiellement de sa faute aussi. Il est vrai que nous encadrons un grand nombre d'étudiants, un grand nombre de doctorants. Et c'est très difficile pour nous de suivre tous ces étudiants-là, mais aussi les étudiants aussi doivent être concentrés sur leur sujet. Et je dois reconnaître que, et lui-même il a dit en anglais, il est impliqué dans des mouvements panafricanistes, dans des ONG certainement, et qu'il a beaucoup voyagé en Afrique, à Kigali, etc. Je pense après le master, au lieu de se concentrer sur sa thèse, il s'est concentré sur les activités syndicales. Et il n'y a pas de pitié. Il n'y a pas de pitié qui me disent j'ai perdu mon père est décédé, je n'ai pas de bourse, ça c'est pas mon problème. Ce qui est important pour moi c'est est-ce que le travail qu'il va soutenir, est-ce qu'il est bon? Le travail de recherche n'est jamais parfait, mais il y a un minimum. Et dès que ce minimum-là est perceptible, ben, l'encadreur n'a aucune raison de ne pas aider l'étudiant à soutenir. Et c'est ce qui est arrivé avec cette thèse. On a fait souffrir. C'était tout simplement académique. Et je pense aussi il a compris cela. Il a vraiment fait des efforts et ce sont ces efforts-là qui nous ont poussés à le faire soutenir, même si cela a été extrêmement dur pour lui, parce que vraiment nous tous nous sommes durs sur l'homme ici, parce que, je le répète encore, c'est des diplômes qui ne nous appartiennent pas. and I think that you understand that. Donc je profite de l'occasion pour dire aussi que vraiment c'est quelqu'un de très bien. Humainement, il est bien. Il a dit que quand son père est perdu, quand il a perdu son père, il a dit ça en anglais, sa maman lui dit que donc vous avez un père au Sénégal, mais c'est autre chose. Ça n'a rien à voir avec la recherche. Nos propres enfants qui sont là aussi ont des problèmes. Mais elle avait ses enfants ici, ils avaient les miens ici, mais il n'y a pas de pitié. C'est comme ça que ça fonctionne. Donc, si vous êtes aussi notre fils, que nous acceptons, mais nous aussi sommes obligés de nous en tenir à ce que nous oblige de faire l'académie. Mais humainement, il est vraiment irréprochable. Il s'est intégré dans la société sénégalaise. Il a des amis sénégalais, il faisait partie des étudiants les plus engagés vraiment dans les activités que nous menions, les exposés en master, etc. Donc, irréprochable sur le plan social. Et je pense que peut-être c'est quelque chose qui vient de ces communs lointaines mais si proches. Parce qu'il est très engagé aussi sur le plan, j'allais dire, culturel. C'est un véritable Africain. C'est un véritable africaniste. Et c'est l'une des raisons certainement qui l'ont poussé à choisir un sujet qui traite de questions panafricanistes. Donc, félicitations pour tout ça. Et désolé madame et les autres si on l'a fait souffrir et que vous avez souffert avec lui. Now this being said, I would like to come back to the work itself. As I said in French, this is a very committed student, a Pan-Africanist, who really believes in Pan-Africanism. The topic, African integration, past, present, and future, is telltale really of your being interested in African studies. And this is really something that shows also in the body of your work. The topic is a very interesting one, as I said, and you have presented it in good English. As you know, when you gave the first draft, it was not really very good. And I insisted on you changing things, and then the final text has been really improved. The quality of the English in the final draft is acceptable compared to what you first gave. And I've got to really insist on the fact that this has been possible because you are not a stubborn student. There are some students, you tell them, do this, and they said, I have already done it. And this was not really the case. I really appreciate this quality, that is being able to receive comments, advice from your supervisor, and take them into account. And this has really led to this result, because the outline has been very well improved. whereas it was too long, too scattered. But this one is rather acceptable, even though I still find it to be a little bit long. It could have been shorter than that. You have, as I said, chosen a topic as a Pan-Africanist. It is, as a militant, it's really sometimes, and you mentioned this in your presentation, it's sometimes difficult for you to establish a difference between the researcher and the militant. Of course, it is not easy for researchers, any researcher, to detach themselves from the topics, because choosing a topic in itself shows some partnership, some sense of partnership. But when developing, you really have got to understand that it's not the militant who is writing, but the researcher. This is really maybe one of the weaknesses we have in your work, but it's quite understandable. In any case, you have before dealing with that, I've got to insist on the English, your oral English. I find it really, I would say, even good. You really have made a lot of efforts with your oral English and with your written English. You really have got to acknowledge this. But there are some mistakes. There are still some mistakes in the written text. Articles, sometimes you omit to put there, etc. Structures that are not always satisfactory. But on the whole, the text is in acceptable English. But because, as I said, it is always possible for researchers to improve their works. Your oral English is also good. Really, a lot of efforts. I really appreciated the presentation of the results of your work, the way you did it. But there are some mispronunciations you have got to avoid at this level. Allow, and what else? Obstacle. Obstacle is French. Is obstacle. Okay. But we're not really very. But the most shocking mistake is really your using the sound "ny" in English, whereas it doesn't exist in English. Okay, "ny." You see, ignorance. Like ignorance. Okay. There is no "ny" sound in English. Okay, so don't say "new." A new book or whatever is a new or the new. So it's here. It is not ignorance, ignorance. So the introduction is good on the whole. We really insisted on you putting there all the elements that must be in an introduction. That is. The context, you have contextualized, you have the problem statement, you have a methodology, you really have all the elements that should be in an introduction, in your introduction, especially the review of the literature, which is without which it is not easy, it is not possible for researchers to write, even though you could have really given more examples. The content now. As I said, you are a militant. You're a militant researcher. Of course, this also shows inevitably in your text, but you have at least succeeded in demonstrating that before its encounter with the Arab world and with the European world, so with the East and then the West, we can talk about unity in Africa. That is unity based especially on culture. Okay? Cultural unity, even though there are, apart from the cultural unity, we also have other political entities who were together forming one big entity in Africa prior to colonization, prior to her contact with the Arab world and the European world. And you have moved from this cultural unity into the new unity that we have to be fighting for today, that is political unity, economic unity, etc. Of course, strengthening at the same time and the social unity. You have really shown this, how Africa have moved from colonization into the Organization of African Unity, and from the Organization of African Unity into the African Union, and then what lies in the future for African countries to get more united, because as I said, unity is the solution. But you have given, I believe, too much importance to the youth. I respect the youth. They are important in the process of helping Africa get more and more united. But I don't believe that it must be something apart. That is, the youth there playing the key role. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in categories. You have devoted a whole chapter or section to the role of the youth. Of course, that is important, but I believe that you don't have got to make the mistakes that is being made in this country and maybe in Africa. People wanting to believe, or political leaders wanting to make us believe that the solution is in the hands of the youth. And then the youth has got to kick the elderly or the elders or the seniors away from the whole place and grab the place for themselves only and orient the future of Africa. I think this is maybe a mistake which is being made even in this country by some political leaders. And this is something you have got to avoid. Okay? It is the addition of all the categories, their seniors, their juniors, women, etc., who have got to get together, join forces, and go for the results. This is really what I wanted to tell you regarding the future. And you insist also on the respect we have. All the problems we have been going through are due to the lack of respect. And you want to find a solution for Africans. to be respected by the rest of the world. But what is the solution? I think this is the big solution. This is the big question. Why is Africa not respected? Why are Africans not respected? Is it because of their being black? Is it because of their being poor? These are situations you have got to analyze. And you lay the emphasis on people being black, yes. You lay the emphasis on the economy. Sorry. And I believe that the economy is more determinant than the race issue. I don't believe that race is based on, that racism is based on race. That what is called racism is really based on race. And maybe for Africa to be respected, I believe that we have got to be more concerned about what do we have got to do in order to develop our economies. And there are some who call this economism. And they believe that economism is the solution. And I share their opinion. I share their opinion because I believe that colonialism, slavery,
thank you very much for giving me the floor. I would like first to thank our honorable guest from Côte d'Ivoire, Professor Adou, for making this effort. We know that moving in Africa requires so much effort, and you accepted to make that effort in order to be here among us, to be in Senegal, to be in your country, because we believe in the unity of Africa. It is your country, and as Professor Dieng said, it is the first time, but we hope it is just the beginning of a fruitful cooperation between our two institutions. Thank you so much then for being here among us. I would like then to thank Professor Faye. I call him Grand. Grand means something. You have so many connotations when you call somebody Grand. It's a sign of respect. And he knows that we respect him for his erudition, for his knowledge, for his huge experience, academic experience. Thank you then for every time accepting to come and participate in the assessment of our students. Professor Dieng, I will not say much about him because everybody knows in this university our companionship, our friendship, let's say even our kinship. I will just say that many people say he's generous, academically generous, because it is what you know. But I know that generosity has no boundary. If you are academically generous, it means that in all other areas you are generous. So thank you very much, Professor Dieng, for for your commitment to the success of our students. It's not very easy to supervise students. Musa talked about it. There is a lack of documentation, but he accept to even share his documentation with students. Antoumani Musa is a very, very serious student. He's hardworking. I remember every time in our Master 1, Master 2 classes, whenever we ask for volunteers, he used to be among the first students who raised their hands to volunteer to make presentations in the classroom, to share, to do research, and share his knowledge with the rest of the class. I think his commitment has translated into something important here. It is the work we have in front of us today. And sincerely, when I listened to him, when I was listening to him making his oral presentation, I was really satisfied with the work the Department of English is doing, because we know that when he came here, first came here, the command of English, his command of English was not so high. But thanks to his efforts, thanks to the effort of all professors here, he has succeeded in gaining a high command of the English language, and it's very clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to greet all the members of the panel and tell you that I'm very, very happy to be here in Senegal. This is my first time to come, and I would like to thank Mr. Ken for inviting me. I'm here to learn. As you can see, I'm young, even if I'm a full professor, but I still have to learn. And your experience will be very, very helpful to me. So thank you. As you said, Professor Jen, you said this is the beginning of a collaboration between Sheikh Anta Diop and the University of Bouaké, BAO. Yes, I'm ready to come here again because there are many, many things to learn in this beautiful country. I knew many things about Senegal before traveling, but I think seeing the country by myself is something very, very stressful. So thank you for inviting me. I would like to congratulate the candidate for the quality of his dissertation. I read it from cover to cover, and I think that this is a very, very well-written dissertation. First of all, I would like to speak about the strength of the work. And secondly, we are going to talk about some debatable aspects of your work. Generally speaking, the work is very well written. And I would like to congratulate you for your good comment, your very good comment on the English language. Because it's not easy to live in Francophone Africa and speak English let's say, in a good way. And when you were presenting your paper, I saw that you were at ease. Yes, and congratulations for this. Congratulations. Maybe before talking about some aspect of your work, I want to come to one of your concerns during your presentation. You said that it was hard for you to find books, good books, was more difficult 3 decades ago when there was no internet in Africa. And ask the questions to your professors how they managed to write the dissertations. Okay, I wrote mine recently, so there is no problem. But ask them. You see, the situation was harder in the past. Okay, today we have internet, and you just have to know how to use it. you see your internet sources, you did not do it in the best way. There are some online journals. Whenever you quote an article, it can come from an online journal. So we must know the title of the journal, the title of the author, the date of publication. And
I think that I could afford not to ask questions because you already asked the main concern questions. So anyway, I wish to thank again Professor Gorgidi, your supervisor, and Professor Ngom, who are my former students, becoming now my teachers. They teach me so many things, you know. And I'm always at ease when I am sitting among them. They are kind enough to come with me in their research and everything, so that I'm sitting here not to go through your thesis in terms of critics, but just to supervise the submission, the defense of this thesis. And I welcome, it's a pleasure for me to meet again a young full professor from Bouake, the university, Professor Adu. Welcome to in our circle. And I wish you come again and again so many times to complete the team. Now, Professor Mr. Musa, I have a certain number of questions, and some debatable, as he said, debatable sources, debatable issues of your questions, of your thesis. And this is very important. I have seen the name of so many writers, thinkers, politicians, heads of state leaders, African leaders. One part of your thesis is dealing with the advocacy for the African unity. I was surprised when you mentioned that there is a lack of documentation. This question, this issue is so old, dating back from the independences. So many things have been written. So many things have been said. So many meetings. Documents are very, 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 very many. So that if you complain from a lack of documentation, I will be surprised. There is not a lack of documentation. Another aspect you mentioned is that from English to French, in translation, you lose some meaning. How come? A document in African unity, the African African Union, who became African Union after OAU. In fact, I used to say that the African leaders are always following step by step the changes in Europe. It was African Union. When Europeans created European Union, they just followed the changes. OAU, why? I find that the main criticism I make is that you are not critical enough against African leaders. The question is not to account for all that has been done since the independences. The past is past. Garvey, Nkrumah, everything is known. You didn't bring something new. Everything had been said. Our concern is what to do. Question is, are you optimistic? What are the blockages? How come that African faith, you mentioned, you're right, you mentioned that African leaders failed to realize African unity. Why? You should be critical against the African leaders now. From the beginning to now, they don't want to lose their independence, their sovereignty. You didn't talk about these concentric circles of Senghor. How to realize this African unity? This African unity. The question, the real issue is what you said. If you are, myself, I'm not optimistic at all. I'm not at all optimistic. When you see nowadays, all leaders are thinking of the third term. They want to stay in power. So they don't think of African unity. They don't think in terms of widening, developing Africa. Stephen Smith, they are always much more interested in power than in Africa. Stephen Smith wrote it as if Africa didn't want Africa to develop. It is a statement of Stephen Smith, who knows very well Africa. So I think that nowadays, the main question for youngsters is not to remind us what happened, everything. We forget this, and we just see what these people should do. What is blocking? And it's in our mind. You mentioned here this book, decolonize the mind, decolonize school, decolonizing everything, youngsters should be committed in criticizing our leaders. The leaders, that's my belief, really. I'm not optimistic, because the friends I'm living now is really, I'm skeptical with this. So this is the reason why I said that
and remarks that will help so much to improve this work. I really appreciate. Just to go straight to the questions that were raised, I will start with Professor Ngom, who I think asked me the disciplines that are taught to Africans. I really appreciate when I came here in Senegal, as I said a while ago, here in Senegal, we try to teach disciplines that are based on African reality. It's not the case with many other countries. I can take the example in my country. In Comoros we have many writers, but we never see in schools those writers taught. We always learn European writers or Western, in general, writers. Sometimes because I remember when I did my terminal, we learned the book under the program was a Senegalese writer, Hamidou Kane. So this is some exceptions, but most of the books are written by Westerners, Arab writers. So this is to say that most of the time, maybe there are some exceptions, many Africans learn history of the others. I used to say that an African intellectual today may know all the corners of USA, France, but when you ask what is Comoros, you may not know what is Comoros. And he's African, and he said that he's free and he knows everything. We may speak English very well, may speak French very well, but we don't speak Wolof, we don't speak Komori, Kiswahili, and this is what I meant when saying we are not taught African disciplines. You asked me also why put in quotations in English, so maybe this is misunderstanding, but I thought that when writing a document like this in English, I thought that all things should be in English. So even quotations from French, I try to translate them in English, but I mentioned on the footnotes that they are from...
The rule is you put the original quotation in French, okay, and then you translate it yourself.
That's fine. Thanks. And to come to Professor Kwame Adu's question, he asked me if, first, what are my findings? I try to respect the chronology of my work, because we have a topic that speaks about the past, the present, and the future, and all my and my findings are based on these aspects. So when I can start by the past, as I said a while ago, that the problem with Africans, they don't know their history. Because if they knew their history, they should understand that Africans lived together Of course, a while ago, a professor said that we didn't share the same language and beliefs. Of course, but I tried to demonstrate in my first part that in remote, ancient Africa, the languages were somehow similar. There was few differences. And this is what Professor Shanta Job tried to demonstrate when dealing with the Egyptian language. There is a big connection between ancient Egypt language with Wolof or Serer, and I think that this is the same thing with the other African languages. When we take the example of Kiswahili, the most spoken language in Africa, you know that Kiswahili is not only spoken in East Africa, but it's spoken also in Central Africa. And we can take also the same with the Pular, I think. Pular is also one of the most spoken language, and it's not only in West Africa, but you can find some countries in Central Africa or near to the Central Africa that speak Pular. So this shows that even there were many languages, but those languages were connected maybe with the exchanges that existed between Africans, because we share the same. And another intellectual said that when we talk about language, we talk about the expression of civilization. And when we share, of course, the same civilization, of course, we share the same language. I think so, and I share that point of view. The other question was if I'm optimistic of an African Union. I don't know if I have to answer because Professor Faye has already answered, but what I can say, that Professor Jen has the habit to say that we should not put the destiny of Africa on the youth. I do agree, but I remember what Wole Soyinka said on Dance of the Forest. He said that when the leaves tremble, the roots, it's not the concern of the roots. And this is exactly what happened now in Africa. Our leaders seem not to be concerned about our difficulties, because they have the solution on the table. The solution is clear. Unity will at least save many lives in Africa. Economically, politically, culturally even, Africa will not be as the Africa we know so far. So I am optimistic of an African Union because today we see how the youth is committed to make change. I just want to take an example. When you talk about African arts, today every leader is talking about taking back our arts stolen by Westerners, but there's not a real policy to take them back. They just talk and they discuss with the thieves, if I can say, because France, Europe in general, they are thieves. And we should not discuss with somebody who came to your house and stole everything. We should not discuss. And when you see youth today, they don't want to discuss with them. There are some youth who go to the museum directly and take those arts because they say, of course, they will be in jail. Of course, they will be arrested. But this is a very clear act that shows that we want to take our arts back. So this is if we should not, of course, rely only on the youth, but I think that when the youth is connected, is united, I think they can make a change and they can bring to this question. Everybody knows that the question of CFA is raised by the youth. Leaders who are here, we can take the example of Abdel Wade. Abdel Wade is an economist. What did they do with the CFA? Nothing. And he could, because he has a good background about economy and currencies, but he didn't do anything. But today, Africa had to wait until the awareness of the youth to raise this question of CFA currency. So I think that when the youth is united, but the problem is that leaders and the West in general, they don't want this youth to be united. Today, Julius Malema in South Africa is fighting alone. Here in Senegal, Marusana, if you allow me, is fighting alone. There is not unity between Sanya in Senegal and Malema in South Africa and Nkrumah in Kenya and Kemi Seba in the diaspora. If there were a connection, there were a unity, between these youth leaders, I think change will be made. If you sorry. I think I answered all the questions asked. Yeah, I do agree with Professor Fai that when sometimes when writing a work like this, sometimes we are, I should not say afraid, but we have some limits. I came to assist sometimes defense, doctoral defense, and Professor raised the question that we should not accuse or be harsh towards our leaders. Sometimes you have to moderate our thoughts, and this is why I could say many things to accuse maybe those leaders, but sometimes I had to observe some limits, and this is why I didn't want to go too far to accuse them, or sometimes maybe it may be seen as an insult towards those leaders. So this is what I had to say, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll be back.